Carreno, who has the dual responsibilities of being the Chief of Operations for the Rhode Island Department of Education, but also serves on the Lincoln School Committee. So the first presentation is going to be about what's happening across the country, but in particular what's happening in Rhode Island, and that's declining enrollment. So well, at risk of stealing a little bit of Mario's thunder, Rhode Island's student population has declined by 23% over the last, I would guess, 20 years or so. Kids Count just came out with a publication that shows the birth rate in Rhode Island declined 18% over the same period of time. So it's a problem, a systemic problem that we need to talk about and to possibly address. I've talked to the head of the Superintendent's Association about possibly putting together a legislative commission to look at declining enrollment and what some of the resources we can bring to address what's going on with that. But without further ado, Mario, do you want to take us through the dropping numbers?
Good morning, everyone. Mario Carreno, Lincoln School Committee. Happy to be here. I think it's the fourth or the fifth time I've done these presentations. I fully understand that on a Saturday there's probably anywhere else we'd rather be than listening to a bunch of presentations, so I'm going to try to make this engaging and entertainment for you. I want to shout out to Rhode and Mr. Chairman Joe Goho, who are here from Lincoln School Committee. Thank you for being here. Oh, and Cheryl's here as well. Oh, there you are. Thank you for coming. You know, I like starting all these presentations the same way because you may be wondering, what is the criteria that Tim Duffy used to have me do this presentation? And unfortunately for you, Tim Duffy doesn't know anybody else who gets his suits at the morgue, except for me. Though I find that surprising because I've seen Paul Bourget shop where I shop. So, so let's get serious. Students are our biggest asset. They're the biggest asset for schools, for districts, for the whole educational framework in the United States. They are the biggest asset of our society, right? They are the future leaders, educators, taxpayers, not just locally, not just at the state level, at the national, but for our whole society. They're our biggest asset. But in a state that uses a funding follows the child methodology, they're also our biggest financial asset, right? Every student is worth about $18,000 in revenue. State, local, and federal, the mix is different for everyone, but there's money here. And the reason I say that is when you see the charts, many of them are in enrollments, but if you convert those charts to dollars, they might give you a different perspective of what we're dealing with here in Rhode Island. So we have an overview, so we're going to spend some time on enrollment trends. Again, all this information is public data. It's all on Rhode's website. There's no insider information here. I'm here today on behalf of Lincoln School Committee to help our fellow school committee members. Why this matters, right? And I alluded to it. This is because there's a financial implication, and you'll see why. But most importantly is what are we going to do about it, right? We can't sit here, and long gone are the days where you sit around and your residents just come to you. That's over. That doesn't happen anymore. If there's one thing to remember from this presentation, is that losers react and winners anticipate. And your taxpayers and your students and your residents cannot afford losers. You need to do something about getting these kids back and keeping these kids in your district. I will start with this. I always hate when presentations just assume that everyone knows every acronym. So let's start with one. Local education agencies, LEA. You may have heard the phrase. Most people will incorrectly use district and LEA interchangeably. That's not the case. The reason and the rule of thumb is every district is an LEA, but not every LEA is a district. So we have three types of LEAs in Rhode Island. Districts, which are the 36 traditional districts, which have school committees. That's who we represent. There are the state schools and the collaboratives, which there's a handful. And then you have charter schools. There's 25. There's another one starting in September, and there's new ones considered every year. That's a growing number. What you're going to see here, and it's very fascinating, is that there's differences between types of LEAs in terms of enrollments, and even also between types of districts. The reason I start with this is because some charts will be about LEAs, about the whole universe of students in Rhode Island, and some are specific to districts. So that's the nuance here. Keep that in mind as we go. Here is the universe of public school students in Rhode Island. This is for all LEAs. We are down 15%, or 23,400 students over the last 20 years. Again, if you see this as dollars, this looks differently. What you'll see in a minute is that not everyone has the same declines, right? But this is the universe of public school students. Private schools are mirroring this. We had peaked at 27,000 private school students. We're down to just under 17,000 now. So the universe of students is just simply declining in Rhode Island. This is where it starts to get fascinating, are some of the trends that we're seeing. Charter school enrollment is up 1,200% over the last 20 years. They had, at the time, there were 7 charter schools, and charter schools add 1 grade at a time, right or wrong. They do a very methodical approach. There were about 1,000 kids in 2004. There are now 13,500 students in Rhode Island. 1 out of every 10 Rhode Island students attends a charter school. That's pretty fascinating. State schools are also up, but the reason I bring these two up is because Rhode Island now operates in a zero-sum game, meaning every child who goes to a state school or a charter school comes from a district. It always equals 0. 5 leave, you lose 5, right? The math works. We are not like North Carolina or Texas or Florida where we have increasing enrollments and there's enough students for everyone. We now are resorting to taking from each other. The end result is even eye-opening. Traditional districts are down 36,000 students in the last 20 years. That's 1 out of every 4 of you. If you were to leave the room, that represents what we're facing here in Rhode Island. And again, because in the public realm, the supply-demand curve is inversed, we see some very fascinating things in Rhode Island. We have 17 more school buildings than we did 20 years ago, despite having 23,000 less students. That's because we have all these new LEAs that are cropping up. We have 18 more superintendents, 18 more business managers, 18 more of everything because of all the charter schools. In some cases, and some are really big. I list here Achievement First. Achievement First didn't exist 10 years ago. They are bigger than 19 traditional districts. In 5 years, they will be the 5th largest LEA in the state. Excel Academy, who was approved a few years ago, will be the 6th largest LEA in the state in 8 years. So that number is growing on approved seats already. I think it gets close to 20,000. So not only, and we'll go through strategies later on, not only is the battle getting these back, it's preventing more from leaving. There's a lot of money at stake here. The charter school, this one is eye-opening, right? It's just very methodical. Every year, new grades being added, more charters being approved at the state level. And we need to do something about this. This, I think, is also fascinating. So while you would logically say, well, let's start cutting because we have less kids, well, we have more needs. So this one I thought was really fascinating. In 2025, this year, we actually have more special ed students in Rhode Island than we did 10 years ago, despite having less kids overall, which means that the proportions are increasing and the total number of special ed students. These students require additional resources to succeed. And again, these aren't even split the same between the LEAs. You can see at the bottom, traditional districts have 19% special ed students. And actually, if you look at the breakdown, we're probably not even spread equally. Charter schools are around 12%, which is perhaps higher than I had anticipated, and state schools are around 14%. But this is where it gets really fascinating. So not all special ed students are created equally. And I don't mean that in the literal sense, I mean that in the financial sense. So the state identifies students as high cost if they cost more than $75,000 per year, the really high cost students. And I find it interesting that we have 99.8 of them in our districts, and charter schools who enroll 10% of all students in the state have 0.2%. But perhaps this is the flaw when a state funding formula barely pays for high-cost special ed students, right? They are treated as a disincentive, which is why you see these breakdowns. It's wrong what's happening, and I'm hoping that will change in the future. We're also seeing a similar trend with MLL students. So prior to 2013, you might only find significant numbers in Providence and Central Falls. That's no longer the case. We've doubled the MLL population in Rhode Island over the last 10 years. And you look at, there are a lot of people here you might not think would be on there. North Kingstown's on the list, North Providence is on the list, Lincoln's on the list, which means now many of those districts don't have teachers with those certifications, they don't have the resources, they don't have the spaces to adequately serve this population. So it's not all just about cutting. We do have additional needs in our ranks. That's just something to watch. And again, these numbers both continue to grow. The third type of disadvantaged student, that's the term used by the federal government, are students in poverty. That number is also up, so keep that in mind. I'll send the chart later. I thought this was really, really eye-opening. So I did the breakdown of all 36 traditional districts in the state. 22 of 36 districts, that's more than half, lost at least 20% of their students over the last 20 years. Let me repeat that. Half of the districts lost 20% of their enrollment over the last 20 years. It's really eye-opening. 34 out of 36 lost students. These are the ones who lost the most. One of the trends you'll see here is its many waterfront communities. You have South Kingstown, Westerly, Middletown, Little Compton, places where the property values are increasing so much faster than everyone else in the state that families with young students can't even afford to move in. So you have either people from out of town, people buying second homes, but it's the perfect storm to not get, to have declining enrollments and not get money. Other ones, in terms of just total number of declines, Providence lost 8,000, Warwick 4,000, Pawtucket 2,000. There are huge declines across the board. The biggest winners, and I'll use that in quote, is two. North Providence at 0%, they added 15 kids, and East Greenwich added 24 kids over a 20-year period. There is no growth here at all in our traditional districts. So that's just some of the data. I would also ask, many of you are part of NESDEC where you get enrollment projections already. Ask your superintendent for those because this is historic and present. You want to look at the future as well. In many cases, you might continue to decline. And if so, it's time to start making changes. But again, why does all this matter? Why does it matter how many kids you have? Let's get into that part of the presentation. This is the state's funding formula. I have oversimplified it, but at its core, it's actually a very simple formula. It's number of kids times the number of money per kid that the General Assembly sets each year times the wealth of the town. 1 times 2 times 3. Very easy formula. So if you have less kids, you automatically get less money, no matter what. If you have more kids, you get more. What's also interesting is that the green and the red are interconnected. So if you have less kids and your property values stay the same, either in theory or on paper, you have more wealth available for fewer kids. So you get actually hit twice. You get a lower percentage of the money because your wealth has increased because you have less kids. And then this is magnified in the waterfront communities whose property values are growing faster than everyone else's. It's the perfect storm to lose state aid. It's happening in Rhode Island. So traditional districts are really bad at cutting costs. Let's get serious. We're really slow moving. Some of that is because we have fixed costs. So let's do an example here. Let's say last year you had 25 kids in first grade. Those kids represent $450,000 in revenue, right? Every child is worth a revenue. You need a teacher and a teacher's aide, you need buses, you need a principal, you need to pay for utilities. Okay, that makes sense. Fast forward a year, let's say we lose 5 kids, and it could be for whatever the reason. You still have to pay for the teacher, you still need a teacher's aide, you still need a principal. Your buses, maybe they're less full, you still need buses. But it's really hard to adapt, and in this scenario here to the right, you have $360,000 in revenue. This is one classroom. You might lose 3 in second grade and 4 in fifth grade and go up the line. Never do kids leave in a nice package where you can just close the room. The losses are spread throughout the district. However, not every expenditure is fixed. So let's take a guess. Paul, let me ask you, let's do some question and answer here. If enrollments have been declining over the last 20 years, do you think in Rhode Island we have fewer administrators or more administrators? You are correct. We have 71% more administrators in traditional districts. This does not include charter schools, which the number would be over 1,000. We went from 512 administrators in 2007 to 876, plus 360 administrators, despite losing 20,000 kids. And again, I don't want to necessarily make a sweeping generalization, but I would ask, I do have the list and I'll send it to Tim to send out, a district by district increase with your enrollments next to it. So in some cases, some districts had doubled their administrators and lost 30% of the kids. I would at least use that to ask questions. Why? Again, they may be needed. I don't know if we need all 360, but they may be needed. In terms of financially, let's look at this. This is dollars. We have added, so this is just executive administrators and mid-level administrators, also known as the high-paid administrators. We have added $63 million in new cost since 2012. 63 million of new money. The total now is about $200 million per year in executive and mid-level administrators. And please don't take this the wrong way, because you need to pay for talent. I'm not telling you go and cut, like, it's hard to get good people. You need to pay them. However, we have a lot of people out there. It's difficult to get talent, and we seem to be overpaying, and maybe we should even reconsider whether we need all these positions in the light of the talent pool that's out there. FTEs. So FTEs represent 75% of your budget. That's for salaries and benefits. This is all FTEs just for districts. This does not include the state schools or the charters. The orange line is the number of FTEs, and the blue line are enrollments. And you can see before COVID, they were roughly going in the same direction. They have veered off in other directions here. Yes, some of the orange includes ESSER-funded positions, but what we're seeing, some of those positions that were supposed to be temporary didn't go away. They're sticking around. So we'll know more when the next data point comes out. Last year, that orange line needs to start going down. If it doesn't, that's an eye-opening trend. Again, if the enrollments are declining, it's really difficult to keep adding FTEs. It really is hard to do so. So just keep that in mind. This doesn't even factor in collective bargaining agreements or cost of increases. This is just purely FTEs. This one, I think, is really powerful, and perhaps where we should spend some time here. And again, before I begin this is not the forum to debate whether we need charter schools or not. That battle was lost 20 years ago, and they're here, and we're going to live with them. But a couple of things to look at. So the first piece is we pay $65 million in tuition payments. So let's first make sure everyone understands that. You vote on your budget, it's approved, you get your money from your town and from the state, and then come July 1st, you have to cut checks from your budget to give to the charter schools in the amount of $65 million from your own budget. That's very painful. What's not included, and I actually found it interesting that there wasn't one document I could find at the budget office, at Rhode, at the General Assembly, that showed these two numbers together, but we also send $180 million of state aid that would have come to traditional districts goes to charter schools. All told, $250 million a year is going to charter schools in Rhode Island, and that number will only increase. What are we going to do about it? I've given stories at the January meeting, and I'll do some we've done for Lincoln. Lincoln was able to cut down the Blackstone Valley Prep number in half, from 200 down to about 111, closely half, because we have been operating like a business. They operate like a business. You see ads. I did a lunch walk last week, Providence Place Mall. I saw ads for the Nurses Institute, for Achievement First, and for Excel Academy. On my way to work on Tuesday, I saw a big billboard for LaSalle Academy. Right, the private schools and the charter schools act like businesses. They do advertising, they do marketing, they do surveying. They try to meet the needs of the people that they are trying to get. We need to start operating that way. I actually am bothered that there are still 200 people in Lincoln who wake up and say, I don't want to come to you. I want to go somewhere else. That bothers me. I want to get every single one back. So we've done surveying. One of the things we found was that people liked the hours that Blackstone Valley Prep was offering. They were opening earlier and later. We've changed that. They like the new elementary schools that Blackstone Valley Prep has. They like the gyms. We've added new gyms. 4 gyms opened this September in Lincoln, on time and on budget, I'm proud to say. We have STEM rooms we've added for the first time. When we went to the town council, we found it interesting that the state metric is now going to focus on science proficiency, and we don't have any science rooms. So we've added them. We've added other classrooms. So again, we've made some changes. We were losing tons of kids to Davies, so we added a culinary program, right? We are adapting. You should ask these questions to your administration. You should ask questions between yourselves. What strategies can we do? Maybe, to get some of it back, but really to prevent. This number will continue to increase over the next several years. And not all of them are performing, right? One of the ones, the Village Green Charter School, which has 210 students. I've never seen a LEA it makes financial sense to operate at 210 students, which is interesting because if you look at their assessment results, they have 0% proficiency in math. Not a single child does math on grade level at the Village Green. But rest assured, they have a director and an executive director. The director makes $160,000 and the executive director makes $200,000 a year. It's an interesting use of taxpayer dollars. The number of charter schools is set in state law. So in some ways, that number was determined probably 20 years ago when they were created. So there is a number, like a cap that's in state law. But those are legitimate questions. I would direct them to your legislators and to others to answer, to be held accountable. I agree with you. Go ahead.
To follow up on Fred's question, why does Rhode allow those charter schools that don't meet proficiency, don't even come close? Why does it allow them to continue to exist? If my town had those kinds of test results, Rhode would be right in there saying that you are not performing, so we need to take you over.
I do find it paradoxical that in a state with declining enrollments, we keep adding LEAs. Like there's another question aside from performance on the need of adding more of everything. Your point is well taken, but that's not for me to answer, unfortunately. Purchase services. Oh, do more.
You added in response to, do you have numbers in terms of how many students you actually impacted?
Yeah, so for BB, so we are actually growing. So this is nice. I should have done a slide on this one. So we were down about 15% from 20 years ago, the Lincoln chart, and I tracked it over the last 5 years. We've clawed that number down to 10% decline. I think we're up like 200 or 300 kids since 2018, so we've gotten some back. We can directly see the Blackstone Valley Prep number. One of the things we get, and I don't know if you get it, if not, you should ask for it. Every month we get a report from the superintendent on by school where we're losing kids to. So we can see to Village Green, to Davies, to wherever, and we track that. And we can see that the BBP one has been cut down from, it was, I think, just at 200 down to 111. Like we can trend that one. Davies is down. So we can actually see some of the progress. If you don't get that report, you should ask for it. Because I think that was very useful because the strategy to combat different ones is likely going to be different. If you're losing to, and some of you lose to other districts, like we haven't even talked about, that's coming up, right? We're also taking from each other. There's a whole strategy on battling with CTE where you have to add programs, but that's a different strategy than going after charters or going after private schools or whoever. Go ahead, sir. No, we probably should. I mean, we did it on our own, but you could absolutely hire someone. I mean, we could even, again, this is a great segue, we could even buy the service together and for less. So perfect segue, sir, because we have $225 million of purchase services in our districts. This does not include COVID money. This is just regular money. That means when we're buying paper and we're paying for consultants and professional development and XYZ. That number, going back to 2019, is $1 billion of purchase services per year, and far too often, and I don't know why, we're all buying things separately. Right? We are missing out on bidding efficiency. We are missing out on purchasing power. That even if we trimmed 5% of this number, that's over 10 million back without changing anything in service. So a great segue. If others here were interested in surveying families or whatever that perhaps, and you were going to purchase that service, that we would set up, there should be a website or some clearinghouse where districts say, these are the services we're going to look at over the next year, and you match up with others. I think that would be logical, and this might be the first test case. If anyone's interested in doing surveys, maybe we email Tim or David, but we start going there, and this will certainly reduce costs for everyone if we do so. But the other one in transportation, and I'll do a shout out to Dr. Copeland who's here. The Transportation Commission has just wrapped up. The Commission is recommending a series of changes that would save $7 million a year for LEAs. This also includes establishing a homeless student transportation fund. We have talked about this before, where Massachusetts funds 100% of homeless students. In Massachusetts, we do zero. They fund 0 private schools. We fund 100% private schools, right? We are the inverse of Massachusetts. We keep saying we want to beat them and be them, but we don't act that way. So the idea behind this legislation is to begin to create that homeless transportation fund. The first 2 bills, which are increasing the number of passengers on a van, that is scheduled for consideration already. It's already passed the House. We're hopeful that one will go through. It's logical. We already have the vans, except we just can't fill them. It's crazy. So Massachusetts allows up to 10 passengers for vans. We only allow up to 8. So we have to drive by people and then send another van because we can't pick them up. So hopefully that will get changed and go through. We're looking at a temporary waiver process. So many times there are drivers in Massachusetts and Connecticut who could help the border towns, but our state law makes it very difficult for them to come and help out. These are experienced bus drivers who drive their regular car across the state line probably every day, but they're not qualified to ride our buses. Like it's bizarre. So that one's up for consideration. Hopefully that'll go through. And then the big one, this is where we need everyone's support. We are proposing to change the transportation regions to make them smaller. The regions that exist now were from 1977, and they are drawn up based on the career and tech centers at the time. We've moved away from that model. We have 250 career and tech programs in every high school in the state. We don't need these vast zones that are leading to inefficiency. So we are proposing 9 smaller regions, which would still provide CTE transportation, still provides private school transportation, but we're cutting out all the excessive routes. We had many routes that go over, we actually have them now, that go over 20 miles each way. It's bizarre. You're driving by 20 or 30 schools to go to that, like it's crazy. So hopefully that'll go through. When we get go ahead, Dr. Hopen.
I'm just going to say, Tim Duffy is working on a draft resolution in support of these regional bills, so I know you're going to get that out soon.
I'll get that out probably tomorrow with my legislative update. Just in case, the Senate bill reconfiguring the districts is 922, and the House bill is 6236. But I'll incorporate that in the draft resolution that you'll be getting tomorrow.
And then I would say too, if anybody's kind of new and they haven't done this before, it's really useful to send it to your town council and ask them also to support the legislation, and then send it directly to your legislators. Don't just assume they're going to see it, right? Because they need to know this is what you're advocating. Sorry.
Just to Mario's point, the liberalizing the registration process for bus drivers and expanding to 10, it's pretty much done. It's going to be on the Senate floor this week. The House has already passed it. So now the focus is going to be on reconfiguring the transportation zones.
And please either send resolutions and or send your personal emails to your reps and senators. The people who are against these are contacting them already, because we're getting questions from private schools and others who would lose. And again, if they don't hear from you and they only hear from them, guess what? We're not getting new regions, and we're all going to continue paying for this.
The Transportation Study Commission basically implied that these bills within private school transportation absolutely no, but they're not. Absolutely. I mean, I know we would support that, but that's absolutely not true. You need to say, parents, if you live in our district, you can attend the private schools in our district, our region, and be bused there. That's not changing. I mean, we need to kind of combat that narrative, because that's the narrative that's being used.
Is there any chatter, please, of including transportation in the funding plan?
There are, the commission didn't cover that. There are bills that are introduced. I think one of them that I saw that was, I think had its hearing last week, would have only been for regional. So the regional school districts at the moment get half of their transportation bill covered. Go ahead.
There are two categorically aid formulas. One is for high-cost special education. The other is for in-district and out-of-district bus transportation. They total $27.5 million. Charter school reimbursement is $33 grand total out of $27.5 million, and that's for high-cost special ed. They don't have any skin in the game when it comes to transportation, either in district or out of district.
We have 450 road miles and a transportation bill of
That's like
$6+ million every year, because we just happen to be one of the 2 largest towns in the state.
We're seeing costs. I mean, and there's all these layers of these costs. So one of the things we found as part of this commission was that it's not necessarily the providers themselves, it's the federal requirements to take some of these kids. So if someone is homeless, the state borders don't even apply. You have to take them. We were sending a student to Boston from Lincoln for a year and paying half the bill, and they were paying the other half. We have special ed students who are entitled. Again, the state boundaries don't even apply. However, the state law is the only place you'll find transportation for career and tech and private school students, and we pay $10 million a year totally. Warwick, and David knows this, they pay just to take kids to Bishop Henrican, they pay $1 million a year just to take kids to private schools. So yeah, the costs are crazy, but in some cases, it's just a function of who we are. And then, yeah, there might be case by case where you have Coventry and these other big towns where you have a lot of distance to cover, and that's the hard part. We are doing everything we can. These bills hopefully will help reduce some of these costs for everyone. The state is also doing a study at the end of this year to look at opportunities where statewide buses go through your town that have empty seats, and you are going to the same place with empty seats, that maybe we can pick up those kids and cut your bus. Like, that would be logical. It's actually, we're going to need your help on this one, because we're trying to get data from districts on this, and the transportation people think that we're like going after them. That's not the case. Like, we're not even questioning your job. We just want your information to see if we can help you save money. And here's a spoiler: if your bus provider is doing your routing, you don't have the most efficient runs. Let's be clear on that. So I would ask for another look. Woonsocket is doing that now. We were going to share the report when it's ready. We are positive, without it, like when we sent it to Transpar, they looked at the route list, and within 10 minutes they go, this is not a fit. So we're going to find some savings. I'm not going to say who they use, but I suspect this applies to everyone. That if your bus vendor does your routing, you are not operating efficiently. So we will share that when we have it. We're hoping to have a state report by the end of the year to find opportunities. One of the ones we looked at quickly is we've done some pilots with Warwick and Providence. The table in the back will be very happy. We've already found 5 buses in Providence that we can just shed beginning this September. We're going to pick those kids up for free because we already have space on our bus. That'll save you over $400,000 a year. And Warwick, we also did a search for you as well, and we found, I think, 2 buses for you. That's before we even do any reconfiguration. We think you'll save more. But right off the top, just picking up kids that we're both going to the same location, there's going to be savings. This report will hopefully yield savings for everyone. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more opportunity there is. But again, we know we have seats on our buses. We know you have seats on yours. It doesn't make sense for everyone to going to the same place. So that's something to look forward to. That'll be by the end of the year. But please, when that bill gets a hearing, please send emails, send resolutions. But we need support, because a big piece of the savings are the smaller regions. If that doesn't go through, the savings in the scheme of what we're paying is very minimal. I've used shared services potential is another way to look at it. So, is there a version of this where, let's say Lincoln and Cumberland as an example, where you consolidate the administration, but for the regular person, they don't even realize what's occurred. So in my neighborhood, the kids would go to Salesville, Lincoln Middle School, Lincoln High School. In Cumberland, you go to B.F. Norton, and then you go to McCourt, and then you go to Cumberland High School. Like, is there a way where we do that, and then we split the administrative costs as a possibility? But take a look. So here's some data. So Lincoln has the same amount of students as Foster, Gloucester, and Scituate. And by the way, Foster, Gloucester is not a regional district. That is a fragmented district. You went from 2 towns to 3 districts instead of 2 towns to 1 district. That's not the model to use, but I am using it for this. And including Scituate. Scituate has less than 400 kids at high school. That is eye-opening. That is not sustainable. But again, the kids are exactly the same as Lincoln. This collective to the right has 32 administrators, 4 superintendents. Granted, some are part-time. They have 4 business managers. Some are part-time. 4 HR directors, 4 special ed, 4 transportation managers, 4 food service. Like, there's a lot of everything between those. Look at the schools. Lincoln educates those same kids in 6 buildings. That collective uses 10. They have 2,200 empty seats in the ones on the right. They are spending $825,000 or $500,000 more than Lincoln to heat and cool empty seats. That should be eye-opening. So as we continue to look into the future, with enrollments continuing to go down, charter schools continuing to take, We also need to look at within. How can we share? Can we share things? I know regionalization is taboo, fine, but there might be ways to share services or share other things. If you are a district of 3 schools or less, you do not need a full-time business manager. Let me give you a spoiler. You don't need it. But, and on top of that, it's even hard to get them. We are resulting from stealing from each other because you can't get anybody else. Newport and Middletown both have openings at business managers. Why are there 2 openings? There should be 1 opening, right? And you can work together. You can probably pay more in total and only split half the bill. So again, that's just an example, but we need to start thinking creatively. We can't just rely on the norm. In a minute, I think it's just questions there. Oh, strategy. So I'll do a recap of some of the strategies, and then the ideas, we would have a discussion here. I mean, you can ask questions too, but a discussion and ideas between each other on are there other things that we're not thinking about? What are some ideas or strategies to either bring in more money or to reduce costs? So in general, there are only 2 ways to deal with this, right? Either we have to reduce expenditures, so take a look at your FTE counts. I would ask for a list from your superintendent. How many FTEs do we have this year? Compare it to last year and look at your enrollments. And if they are not jiving, that's a red flag. Rhode has spent a lot of money. Yes, ma'am.
So in the strategies, when we're talking about reducing, just when when student enrollment is going down, we are not taking away services, so to speak, right? So there's only so much reducing you can do before you start to take away services.
That's correct.
So how do we work around that?
Yeah, so I would start by grabbing the list of FT. See what you're working with first. See where the new ones are. So that the positions that have been there historically, those are hard. There are a lot of new positions and new job titles that have been created. Some crazy job titles have been created over the last 5 years. And then take a hard look. Do we actually need those? And yes, your point is well taken. And this is why this is critical for the smaller districts, because it gets to a point. If you're Cumberland and you go from 5,000 to 4,500 students, it's not such a big deal, because again, the economies of scale are still there at 4,500. If you're down to less than 1,000 students, Little Compton has 218 kids. I don't know how that works. So at some point, the services are critical, and then things are out of whack. If you look at New Shoreham, Block Island, they have to have a first grade teacher. They had 1 kid enroll last year in first grade. So that child, the cost for that child is going to be through the roof, because you still got to pay a teacher, and Block Island has to pay even more to get people out there. So you might be paying $100,000 for a teacher for 1 student. And then you still need a guidance counselor and this and that. So yes, there's a point where you cannot cut anymore. So this, and everyone here is in a different place, but if you have less than 1,000 students, this is much more important. Or if you're trending that way, this is much more important. If you have in the 7,000, 8,000, there's other issues, but perhaps not existential issues, which are existing for the small ones. I would review staffing levels. I would ask, so one of the things that Rhode has done really well, they spent a lot of money on the uniform chart of accounts in terms of making it visual and very easy. They have what's known as a LEA profile. And right on the front page, and they actually made it very easy, it shows enrollment with an arrow, FTEs with an arrow. If you don't do anything else but look at that, if your arrows are going in different directions, something's wrong, right? At least ask those questions. If they're trending in the same way, don't worry about it as much. But I would start there. Again, 75% of your budget is people. So if you want savings, we have to start with people. It sounds awful. I'm not trying to be Elon Musk cutting everybody, but I'm saying we have to at least understand that that's where the opportunity lies for us as districts. The second one is to compare your expenditures with other districts, right? Again, the Uniform Chart of Accounts does a great job making it very easy. You can even self-select who you want to compare with, right? It pre-populates for you on similar districts, but a lot of people like doing the regional approach, like who's right next to us. But you can click on that and see, well, how much are we spending on sports, as an example, compared to someone else? How much are we spending on CT? What are we spending for this? And if you are way over or way under, that should prompt you to ask more questions. Now, granted, some of these things also have a high return on investment. So if you're spending more on CTE, but you're then grabbing more tuitions, that makes sense. If you're underspending and losing, then you should ask some of those questions to yourself. Again, start to act like a business, and this is different than acting like a district, right? We need to change that mindset, because everyone else who's taking from us acts like a business. And the third one, again, if we can maybe consolidate functions. I know that maybe in the future some of these districts will actually say regionalization isn't so scary. It's prominent in Massachusetts and other places, and it's not done necessarily because we want to. In some cases, it's because we have to. If you have, and there are a few high schools now that have less than 400 kids in their high school. There's a few throughout the state. That may be the wake-up call. There's actually a trigger in state law that has, that's why I've been saying that number of 400 that forces you to have these conversations. So if you're not having them, don't sit around and do nothing. Be proactive. Otherwise, you'll be eaten alive. And when the state budgets, as Tim mentioned, the revenue conference is next week, when things may get worse before they get better, and towns start looking to cut, going to them every year, if that's your strategy, it's a failed strategy. You cannot rely on 4% each year from your town. So the first one is, well, there's a whole pool of students that are out there. How do we get them, right? Those charter school students can easily come back. There's no contract they sign. We get kids coming back in middle school from BVP to Lincoln. Why can't you get yours back? Find ways to do so. Maybe add, one of the strategies we're seeing is if you add pre-K, we have some pre-K, but if you expand your pre-K and families come to you for that service that typically is not offered at a charter school, they're less likely to leave. Right? They get used to coming there. They get used to seeing the school. The kids start making friends. That's a strategy. Add pre-K, right? There might be an expenditure there, but it might pay long-term dividends. Right? Every child is worth $250,000. It might be worth spending $1 million one time to build a classroom and hire a teacher, and then pick up 20, 30 kids, right, over the life. It'll certainly pay for itself. But going after private school students as well, right? If the economy is going to get shaky, this is the perfect time to go get them. Start doing ads. I know, in credit to Coventry and North Providence, I saw ads for the first time ever on their culinary programs. That was very surprising, but they're starting to be proactive, right? Go out there and get kids. I saw a question. Is there a question over here? Yes, ma'am.
Just coming from a school district where every one of these challenges applies, and having gone through the RIDE and color data for several years, the one challenge, because it is very useful information, and a lot of this, being able to see the success of CTE programs financially, et cetera, is all very good. The challenge is that RIDE's data is all usually quite stale when it concerns the finances. Has RIDE made any inroads to updating financial data a little bit more real time?
Yes, is the short answer. So there's a finite point in time of how soon it can be ready. So let's say the fiscal year ends on June 30th. Well, between June 30th and December 31st, you have to go through your audit. So it's not even final then. So even under the best scenarios, it wouldn't be till December 31st. Auditor General typically grants extensions because your audit is with the town's audit or the city's audit. So that usually buys some time. And then with RIDE, they have to wait for everyone to send their data in before you start publishing state results. So it takes, if we have 4 or 5 who take their time, it's really hard to publish statewide data without that. But I will say that the fiscal year data was coming out in October. We've shaved it back to about March or April, so there's been a 6-month cut in time, which is good. But even under the most optimal conditions, it might be there might be a couple more months we could shave, but that requires cooperation here, and please get your data in. We have many districts who are very slow at getting the data in. It takes cooperation from the towns and the Auditor General. So it's happening. I wish it was even faster, but even, again, under the most optimal conditions, we might shave 2 or 3 months. At least now it's relatively available during budget season in April, and granted it's a year back, but at least it's better than going 2 years back. So I think it's a little bit better in that regard. CTE, that's an interesting one. We barely talked about that, but now this is the one where we end up taking from each other. Because the state has a funding follows the child formula, there are many districts who had all these programs. We have 250 programs in our state, and they're open to everyone, right? And transportation only carries some of them. Some of them get there on their own. Some people send their own buses. There's a lot of money out there.
Leave that CTE program to stay in that other district. And we've had trouble working with those other districts to get that information. And is there a mechanism from RIDE to know that data and It seems odd to me that we would still be on the hook for that student if they're not participating in that CTE program that they originally chose.
You know, one of the things that's so most students, I'm certain, are enrolling in CTE programs because they actually care about the program. However, there are many examples of people who are going for other reasons, whether it's anywhere but Lincoln, anywhere but North Province, they just want to get out. Whether they have great sports teams in Foster Gloucester, great sports teams here. Sports is a big driver of this, and it's masqueraded as CTE. The vast majority, I'm sure, are legitimate. However, there are some that are illegitimate that, in this case, it doesn't matter if they change programs, right? They'll say they're for this, and if you call them out, they'll just sign up for another program. Those are really hard to do. And I think Bristol Warren, there was a famous example, I think, where they spent a lot of time contesting a student going to one district. They ended up winning, and the student just changed programs. And it's like, they just didn't want to go to Bristol Warren. They don't want to come to Lincoln. But the answer there is to find out why they're leaving and maybe stop others. But yeah, that's a hard one. So again, in the context of the existing rules, now if the rules changes, but you have two strategies with the CT. Either you do something unique that's not offered and try to get kids to you, or you replicate. So if you look at your data, and you can ask your superintendent, how many students are we losing to Johnston for this, or to Westerly for that? And if you're losing kids for carpentry, and the numbers make sense, build your own carpentry program. Right? It's the only, that's how you would operate. It seems crazy. So the difference to make it, I think, dissimilar is you could have different books. There's a gray area into what similar is that I think many complain about, for sure. But you can add, so again, Lincoln got a culinary program approved, and Davies is 2 miles away, and they have a culinary, and we did it because we were losing kids to Davies. So they're just different enough. And this is where it's interesting, they're different enough when Davies wants to get our kids, but they're similar enough when they want to stop us from being created.
The CT pathways, but on the funding issue, the funding that follows the student, right? What amount follows the student? If a kid from Warwick goes to Pontiac, goes to Enfield, is it the Warwick per people that goes?
Yeah, so it's similar to the charter schools. So you cut a check, and your state aid that would have come to you follows them.
Receiving districts per pupil cost is $1,000 less per student. Do they actually make $1,000?
Yeah, so there's a nuance here where everyone has different rates, different exchange rates. Perhaps, there's some. But again, this is one of the odd things where I think when this was created, perhaps they didn't envision it becoming what it is now. CT is great, by the way. They have students who are enrolled in CT programs have higher graduation rates, are more engaged, come to school more. So we should have it. But I think the framework that exists now is maybe counterintuitive to what it should be.
And then also in that amount that goes with the student. Tim, you correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't there a portion of that that's considered special ed?
No.
No?
Yeah, well, as part of your entire per pupil, your special ed costs constitute about 23 to 24% of your per pupil. And the problem with choice is that when the money doesn't actually follow the student, because special ed students are not enrolled in charter schools by and large, and they're certainly not taking advantage of career pathways. So when Warwick, which has a per pupil of about 19,000,
We'll hide that.
higher than that, when that student leaves to go play baseball in North Kingston, all due respects to North Kingston, that $19,000 to $20,000, about a quarter of that is special ed money. But there's no special ed students receiving services.
That's the point.
That's the point. That's the flaw, and that's the flaw with charter funding as well.
So, and again, I have no problem with pathways, and if the district doesn't have a pathway, the student should be free to go to the pathway, right? The argument is, well, what's similar or comparable, right? Because Ryan's made that very difficult. But to me, the funding of it's the problem. Not the theory of having a student go somewhere. But, if you're going to have, if you're losing a significant amount of students to that, right? And then within that funding that goes there is a special ed cost, the student doesn't have an IP, right? So the receiving district, you said it, we're running like businesses now, right? Shouldn't be making profits on kids in public education. And to me, those things, that's oil in the water for me. Marketing's fine, but making a profit on a kid, and then when you want to change that, if ever an ox gets gored, it's going to be very vehemently against that. And that's the problem that maybe it's not an unintended consequence, but it is a consequence of losing a lot of kids to pathway. So you force the district, you got to add programs, you've got to do it, everything you can. And in the private sector and businesses, some businesses do that, and they go out of business.
All the new high schools that are being built all have programs, right? There's more programs coming, more competition. Now, yes, that's a state law change, but that needs some serious watching because under the framework that exists now, but again, you have to play the rules that exist, right? So you know what, you're losing kids to Johnston for culinary, you're gonna build a better culinary program and get their kids and keep yours, right? That's the way. It's counterintuitive, right? They should have a culinary and you should do something else and everyone plays nice. That's not how it works. So that's a big one. And then the other one, find new revenue sources. So one of the things we have in Lincoln is a revolving capital fund. I know East Providence recently adopted. Some of you also have this. We use this fund to repair our buildings. So if you have municipalities who have extra buildings, so Lincoln sold a building 3 years ago. They gave us the money for this fund. This money, because everyone gets reimbursement on school construction projects, we get, because the bonus is 50% back. So we've done the work, the money comes back, and then you spend it again, and you keep spending it. We've done it in a way now, putting reimbursements in there. It started with $11 million in our fund, and by the time it's done, we'll have done over $25 million of work without issuing any debt, which is a huge thing. I can send you examples. I know Providence has one, I know East Central Falls has one, Lincoln, and East Providence, you have them too? A formal one?
So it's a small one, but the idea is that through capital expense repayment, not including the bond, will go back.
And that's documented?
Yeah.
Just, we saw with some districts where they were operating that way, the moment the administration changes at the city side or town side, a lot of times agreements then are like, what agreement, they say?
I would say too, what's really nice about this is you don't have to go to the town council now to ask for approval to use that. It's not like you're asking for capital, you're using out of that revolving.
Yeah, no, it's true. And one of the things we have, so in Lincoln, we have the financial town meeting. So we have it set up where they just vote on allowing the projects to be eligible. They don't vote on any money. So it's really easy for people to vote for a project with zero next to it. What we are going to have them consider on May 12th is to allow state aid anticipation notes to be paid for by a revolving fund. Issuing short-term debt to be repaid by future housing payments. We'll be the first in the state to try it, if the voters approve it. This would allow us to issue $5 or $6 million to do the work now, because we understand we're going to get $5 million in reimbursements over the next 5 years. So instead of having kids wait for their projects, we are going to have lenders wait for their money. It's as simple as that. That's the tagline I'm going to try at the meeting. See if the people go for it. But that's the plan for that. But again, it's to get creative, find new sources. Maybe you lease out some of your buildings. I know some of you do now. Maybe you be more aggressive with that. Maybe you, I don't know, but it's to find some other revenue sources, and we can figure it. Maybe you start offering adult education programs in the evening and get money from them. Maybe you do something else. But the idea is you have to do one of the two. Right? And then as a last resort, when you get to the point where you can no longer cut because you are taking program and you can't create any new revenue, then you can go to the town and maybe you ask for 2% or 3%. But you don't do yourself any favors if you go every year for 4%. You just don't. And again, they don't do any favors doing level funding, and maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. But if that is like, if you're going all in on 4% increases, if I can quote Judas Priest, you got another thing coming.
We're a fairly big town, a lot of wooded area, obviously. One of the things that I think every school board should be looking at is your ridership. If you contract with a private busing company, look at the ridership numbers for each bus, because I worked for a bus company for years. I was an operations supervisor for a local bus company for years. Look at your ridership. They're going to tell you that we have 50 kids riding said bus. You go actually look at the bus, they're not, they allot for every student that lives on that road, or whatever area that they're picking up. So they'll tell you that that child is riding the bus when actually they're not. Okay? So really, you really gotta look at the numbers of the kids that they're saying. I know at Barbara, we get at the beginning of the school year, before the school year, over the summer, we'll get the routes. And like you said, the bus company, the private bus companies are doing the routing. Look at the routes and look at the number of students that are riding the bus. I guarantee you it's totally different. I guarantee it. Because a lot of kids are going to daycares. A lot of kids are being brought into school from their parents. And so if one bus says, I have 45, 50 kids on that bus, I guarantee that's not the number. So that's how you start consolidating buses and really look at the bus routes closely. And maybe more depot stops. I know Barbara's kind of hard because we're wooded area, but if you can, more depot stops, which will cut down on the time. That's a big complaint about parents with little kids. Oh, my child rides the bus for over an hour. I understand that. So if you can just do things like that as far as transportation. But I urge you all, if you contract a private bus company, really look at the routes closely and really look at the number of students riding that bus.
Thank you for that. To quantify, every bus is worth about $100,000 per year, so it's worth your time to give it a good look. And I know in Lincoln, Mr. Chairman, maybe we consider this, we just provide a seat for everyone. Maybe you have families opt in and sign some document that they wanted, right? Like just, maybe don't just give it to them, because again, we have many parents now since COVID love picking up and dropping off, and they're getting the bus paid for by the district. So, and I hear like complaints from taxpayers and others, but that might be a strategy.
I just wanted to say, one of the things that we're thinking of doing is sending a survey out to the parents, and is your child going to ride the bus, and just to get some feedback from the parents. And, the parents will tell us, no, my child is not going to ride that child. Well, my child is going to the grandparents' house. So these are just little things you can do. I know I'm going to take, because I was in the busing industry and I did work doing the routes, I'm going to take a real close look this year. And if we can eliminate 2 buses, that's 2 teaching positions we can hang out to. So, just a thought for everybody.
What would you do with that ridership note? So you go to the bus company and they say, bus A has 50 kids, and that's not really accurate. How do you determine, you mentioned surveying, but then what's the next step to cut it back? So, they say, well, no, we have 50 kids here. What's the next step of the actual consolidation?
Yeah,
I know it's not an easy answer.
How do you actually see? And that's the point, you have to actually see, because the bus, like Mario said, they're gonna allot for every child that lives in that area, okay? Whether they get on the bus or not, whether they get transported by their parents, whoever. They're gonna tell you that child is on the bus, when actually they're not. So one of the things is possibly a survey asking the parents, is your child rides the bus? I would suggest maybe asking, because I know at our school, whenever children are being dropped off and picked up, there's a teacher out there. Have the teacher look. Have the teacher look and say, geez, why is there only 15 kids on this bus? It's just little things like that, and I know it seems like a lot, but you have to start somewhere. Yes.
In our district, last year, we instituted an opt-in that all the parents had to fill out, and we tell the bus company who's taking the bus.
We did the same thing.
And we were able to save, I think, at least one bus, so we cut down on costs.
How can we do that when the law states that we must provide transportation for every child in our district? So can you really do a waiver or an opt-in without crossing a fine line?
So this is where there's a gray area, because you can set the distance. Some places, so Lincoln takes everyone. I think Woonsocket, you guys, because of railroads, you take everyone. Some communities say if you live within a mile, there's no service. 1.5 miles, 2 miles. So you don't actually have to provide to everyone. In Massachusetts, some districts charge parents for taking the bus. Maybe that's we can look at that, what that would look like. Yeah, so there's different nuances, but busing is one. For elementaries, it's guaranteed, but for middle and high, you actually have to pay $600 a year if you want to ride. In some districts, it's a school committee decision.
A lot
walking distances, and, you know, yeah, we can certainly increase the walking distance, and, you know, some things could be challenged, especially if you're saying, oh, we're gonna have an elementary student walking 1.5 miles, that's gonna be challenged somewhere. But it's still, the law requires us to have those buses. So when we're looking at our buses, and they're saying there are 58 seats on the bus, and it's a high school run, and there are 56 students, and that's why this run, and we look at the numbers and we go through them, and then 10 children are riding that bus consistently, especially since the pandemic. But if you say, to them, what can we do? Oh, can we ask for the parents to say, look, we're not going to do it? Because what comes down to is that one day out of 180 days, that the parent needs that bus, and we're required to keep that seat open for that child.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we do some survey or opt-in, maybe you change policy that if they don't notify you. The other thing, again, if vans are going to be approved, now the larger ones, maybe you look at vans, which are about 30,000 less per year per vehicle. With a van, you don't need a CDL driver, but some of you are dealing with shortages of drivers. That goes away with the van. So again, there might be there's not a simple answer for it, but again, this is the point of this, to throw out ideas and see what we can do. But that's an easy one. There's nothing worse than spending money on a bus that's empty. Like, I can't think of a bigger waste.
I'd be curious, just talking to other districts and learning some of their experiences, if anybody's purchased buses for, and I'm not thinking like the daily taking kids to and from school, but you know, we have a lot of field trips, we have a lot of sports teams. Has that, because that's all embedded in the busing contracts too, and I just, we've raised that, does it make sense to purchase a couple of vans and we hear no, but I'm just wondering if anybody else has gone that route. So we were talking about the website to have shared information, that would be something I would find interesting.
Thought if anyone knows how to build a clearinghouse or has one where we can perhaps, or maybe we'll task Tim to do this work, is to, like, where's a place where we can notify, hey, we are going to be hiring someone to do the stage 1 and stage 2 application at Rhode. Those things could cost $1 million. Well, there's a fixed cost for the architect to do the work, so if 2 of you bid together, you won't each pay $1 million, you'll pay less. Like, so maybe Tim, is that someone we could task someone to, how do we create a clearinghouse where people can put things that they're going to be seeking bids on, or services or RFPs that are ending? I know there's a good example, Middletown, Tiverton, and I think Little Compton just bid out together their transportation services. That was a great example. We have a few pockets of opportunity, but this is untapped largely. Like, we're all, it's usually every man for himself.
Probably serve as a clearinghouse. There are companies that will go out and secure bids from vendors, because increasingly the requirement that you put it in the Providence Journal is kind of pointless, that nobody reads it and you don't get a lot of bidders to come in on it. We also have, with a partnership with this Texas School Board Association and the National School Board Association, it's called Bible, and it's an online portal. You can put in your business manager or someone from the central office. You're looking for Chromebooks, 2,000 Chromebooks. Put it in, you request pricing, it'll come back. You don't have to buy it, you're not obligated to. You can actually use it to grind maybe your own vendor that way. That's Pawtucket last month bought $72,000 worth of goods through Bible. So I mean, there's an efficiency there, and you know, it's state law allows you to network with an online purchasing consortium. So there are some things there that you can definitely do in terms of purchasing. Well, you know, we'll survey the superintendents and the business managers to see, you know, start small. You know, what are the 10 things that you think you'd like to consolidate on in terms of goods and services? Payroll services. I mean, I don't see why HR has to have their own payroll service. You go to ADP, go to Paychecks, you could do every teacher and every employee in the school district and in the state, and have, there are companies that have more employees that do that. So, I mean, that's one of the things we'll look at, maybe to consolidate things like payroll services.
One of the things charter schools do really well, especially the smaller ones, is they will hire like an accountant or a business manager who's not a full-time employee. They all just pay one person. I think there's one here more, a few in the state, but again, they have to operate like with really narrow margins, that they have to think creatively, that maybe we start thinking creatively for this, for purchasing, for FTEs, for other things. But again, and as we go through the scale of this, if you are a big district, this perhaps is less of a thing. You likely the easiest thing to do is just close buildings, right? Because with buildings, you take all the people, you just get rid of the baggage. But once you start shrinking, it gets to a point where either, like as you pointed out, you're cutting services or you're doing something. But again, think now, don't wait 5 years. There's going to be another 5,000 charter kids.
One other thing you can do on charter schools, state law allows you to hold back a percentage of the tuition that goes to the charter. It could be a flat fee of 7%, or you can itemize about a dozen different cost categories. And Woonsocket does that on an annual basis, and they save a lot of money. The governor proposed capping that holdback at 14%. That would adversely impact basically two districts, Woonsocket and Central Falls. So they're exceeding 14% holdback to charter schools. And that might be something we want to take a look at relative to career pathways as well. That there are certain holdbacks in terms of tuition.
I guess I'm not, does the value hold it down?
Sorry?
What's the value of the holdback?
Well, the value depends on your expenditure. So for instance, out of district busing for special education, it's one of the holdbacks that you have. In Woonsocket's case, Mayoral Academy, and I think they're both Mayoral Academies, right? They don't pay into state retirement for their teachers. So Woonsocket, that's one of the advantages they have. They can withhold what the contribution would have been. So you itemize. There's a series, it's in state law, there's a series of itemizations that you can take a look at. I'll send the statute out there. But you should think about how what you're paying in terms of charter schools and whatnot. And if there's an opportunity to increase the holdback, then you should.
Is there a timeline on how long you can hold that back?
No, you just said that once that student leaves your school district, that tuition is not, that part of the tuition is not going with it. So, unless they return to the old district.
It's not ever going to go? You're going to hold it back permanently? Or you're going to hold it back until the end of the fiscal year? Or
You hold it back permanently.
Oh, look at that.
Now, again, the fact that Woonsocket can hold back teacher retirement is largely what drives the money generated to their, well, not generated, but they're entitled to hold back. Another thing on regionalization, I don't want to intrude on Mario's presentation. Rhode Island has a provision in its constitution, a home rule charter provision, it's Article 13. And it expressly prohibits the legislature from enacting any legislation that impacts the governance of the city or town. Since our Supreme Court has ruled that school districts are municipal agencies, the only way you get to regionalize is through a referendum, changing the charter. So in the case of Pontiac, you regionalize the high school and the middle school, but Foster and Gloucester still haven't been able to convince the voters to unify their 3 elementary schools into one district. That's why there's such an efficiency there. They've got essentially 3 districts instead of 1 district. So that's a problem unless the Supreme Court redefines school districts as entities or corporations of the state. Your ability to regionalize, Pawtucket tried to regionalize the Central Falls about 2 decades ago, and the voters in Pawtucket rejected that. That led to the state takeover of the Central Falls.
Is anybody here use BidNet?
What's the question?
Does anybody here use BidNet? So we're currently, we do, I'm from Pawtucket, so we do a lot of building.
BidNet is a bidding board, kind of putting an article in the journal for RFPs, and we're only getting one or two responses to it. So BidNet is a platform online that a lot of the vendors are going to now, so they don't go to the journal anymore. So evidently it's expensive. So I want to partner with someone on BidNet, so it would make sense if anybody is doing any construction at all, that, so you can get more than two people bidding. We went out for a bid on something, and we got one bid in. And I mean, we're a district of 9,000, so our bids aren't small. And we got one bid. So people aren't using newspapers anymore. You have to go online. So if anybody, I'm Joanne Manolo from Pawtucket, Manolo@gmail. Look me up online. I'm on the CSDRI website. If anybody's interested in BidNet, I'd love to get you information. You can look for pricing. We use Colliers, they recommended we get BidNet, but I'd love to share the price with them. I don't know. I think it's over 10. Maybe we can share it. It would make it worthwhile. Bonolo, BONOLLO, @gmail.com.
Not so much for dog pickup, but more for like service emergency tasks.
So we are, like, again, the districts who have a 1.5 mile cutoff aren't providing service already for people who live within the 1.5 miles. Now, whether, if someone challenged that, I don't know. Some of it we're seeing, and the state just did this, so for private school students, we now, when they sign up, they have to check a box that says they understand that this costs the district money, that if they're not going to ride, they have to notify someone, because that wasn't there before. And then we had, let's talk about one of the commission meetings, we had 550, called them ghost riders, people who would sign up, never take the bus, and you all pay for it. So maybe there's a way where you have someone check the thing. They either might be more vigilant in not worrying for the bus, or they might actually say, you know what, let's take it. But yeah, whether like that would hold up or not, I don't know, but there might be ways to get there or get into a better place than we are now. But that's an easy one. Like, maybe we focus our efforts on a few things, transportation and bidding, and then we start to, the more complicated ones. But again, there's a lot of job postings out there now, and we end up stealing from each other. Maybe some of these if a city and a district can have one HR director, why can't 2 districts have an HR director? Is a thought. Yes, ma'am.
Statistically, what are the numbers of the kids that aren't riding the bus and get your routes done that way? So you know that percentage of seats that are never filled. Can you just use that data to draw your bus routes instead of having to go to parents' route?
You should. I would look at, so everyone has a different contract, which makes this answer more difficult. I would first look at your contract with whoever your provider is, and maybe you have a provision, if you don't have it now, that after like a month, they would survey the kids that are on there and maybe do a reroute or something different. It may disrupt, with everything, every action, like you might upset parents because now they have to go over here instead of what they've been doing for a few weeks, but there might be ways to do it in real time. But again, I would look at your contract. You can put things in your contract that requires them to do reports. The easiest thing might do, and we'll share the Woonsocket report when it's out, is we're having an independent company review their routes and offer recommendations, which we'll share to everyone, and then maybe you hire that vendor to do that for you, or a different vendor. I don't say hire them, because I'll get in trouble.
Was it seated with the sale of a building?
So it was 2 pieces. It was the sale of a building, and then we had finished the physical education center, which was an $8.5 million building, of which we got $4 million back, and they agreed to put the 2 of them together to seed it. So we had $11 million to start.
So do you continually use housing aid reimbursement?
That's all we've been using. So now, we did 11 million, which is going to complete this June, which we know we're going to get $6.5 million over the next 4 years, which is now the idea for this loan. If we know we're already getting 6.5, why can't we, rather than wait 4 years to get it all, let's do it all now, which will also generate housing aid to do more projects. That's the concept that we're doing. You can also add at any time. Sometimes if there's a surplus, we at the Lincoln School Committee have transferred money, the town has transferred money, because people like seeing a 2-to-1 investment. Money seems to find its way there much easier than into our operating budget. Some of you have much higher reimbursement rates. You might get, Woonsocket gets 10-to-1. That thing should be full. We're trying to see if we get them. We're meeting with the mayor.
Mayor, former council president, but it fell on deaf ears. I don't know if they fully understood it.
I can send, so if it's helpful, and others have asked this, so some of you have already seen it, we can prepare like a one-page summary just for you, like it's specific to Warwick with your exchange rate, just to show visually how it works. We can then send the samples of, so Providence, Lincoln, Central Falls, and East Providence have official ordinances that have been passed. The East Providence one is the Lincoln one. But so we can send those, and maybe those together will help prompt some conversations now, especially in light of declining enrollments. For most town council members, once they hear that after the initial investment, it's just state money you're using, they seem to like that.
Do any school departments offer mileage reimbursement to parents to bring their child? And if so, how successful is that, and how can we increase that?
And statewide offered that before. Others do offer it. This is a case by case. So for these, typically it would be for, it would be a service that's required under state law. So special ed, for example, we have some parents who choose, it would be cheaper for us to pay them $20,000 to take their own kid to a special ed than to pay $100,000 for a van, an aide, and a driver and a monitor. It is done. The premise perhaps is odd, so I think some people don't like the idea of it, but if you separate the idea from the financial implications, in some cases it makes sense, and it has been done before. During COVID, when statewide had a shortage of drivers, they were making offers to parents, hey, we'll pay you, it was like $10 an hour to take your own kid to school because there's no drivers to do so. So usually that occurs during dire situations, but maybe look at, this is not a bad idea, look at all the special ed kids or the homeless kid or the foster care kids and see what they cost to transport, and maybe it makes sense to make the parent an offer. Hey, here's $40,000 if you take your own kid, and we'll save $60,000, right? It might be win-win. So we'll do one more. Go ahead.
Back to the very beginning, and you were talking about the administrative costs and increases. Do you have a breakout, or do you have information you could send to us on the breakout of the categories on the administrative cost increases? You know, is it situations that we're looking at that is on this department and administrative has a higher ratio than another department, perhaps?
Yeah, so for so this was pulled from the Uniform Chart of Accounts, whether it rolls up to what you might get that from your superintendent, as an example, by category. Yeah, so and again, we could have spent more time. The idea for this one was just to get a conversation going. And again, some of this, they may all be legitimate in a district by district, but I wonder, again, we're down all these kids, we're adding many. So I will, okay, I have some time, all right. In a minute I have to go to my day job. We have a food truck event today in East Providence. I will lightly promote competing for the Governor's Cup, which is the best savory dish, and the Commissioner's Championship belt. It's a wrestling belt, yes. I'm a huge fan of wrestling. They're competing for both, and I am confident that Lincoln Public Schools will retain its crown today. We'll see if we can pull that off. So, thank you.